We spoke to one of the employees that have been here since '86, and I said, what do you like about working at Nicholson? And he said, I like the steadiness, and I like that there's always work, but they don't rush us, but they focus on the quality, and there's always more work coming in.
I've said this so many times, we're not vacuum cleaner sales guys here, right? We're relationship builders here. Increasing the support in various markets is very, very important to us, because when we sell a debarker, the debarker is going to last, well, I mean, we've got debarkers running in New Zealand that would literally deliver there in the 50s.
There's actually a lot of technology in a debarker. Like, just looking at it, you're kind of like, oh, you're just scraping bark off a log. But there's actually a lot of trial and error has gone into designing these debarkers.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome you, John and Eric, to the ForestNet Media podcast. This is officially episode number 2 for us, so thank you for coming along. We're here on Vancouver Island at Nicholson Manufacturing, and we're going to talk about all things Nicholson Manufacturing. We're going to talk about your journey from New Zealand to the UK to now in Canada, and Eric, your journey being here for nearly a decade at Nicholson Manufacturing and what that means to you. So, yeah, thanks for being here.
Well,
and thanks to our listeners and viewers, and let's crack on.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for coming here. And we're, I guess, only too happy to have you in our building.
Yeah.
So, no, it's been really good.
So, yeah, let's get straight into it. John, you have a funny accent, you know, just like me from the Southern Hemisphere. So let's talk about your journey and how you became the Director of Capital Sales at Nicholson Manufacturing. What led you to Canada? You know, was it the beautiful women? Was it the beautiful mountains, or both, or just the opportunity to work here?
It was just a tree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was funny actually, because growing up in New Zealand, obviously, the forestry industry it's a huge natural resource for New Zealand. And I remember, it's funny because prior to coming here and anticipating some of the questions you might be asking, I was thinking back, must have been about 8 or 9 years old, and we had pen pals from across New Zealand. And one of them, her dad worked at the Kinleith mill in just south of Auckland. And I remember really not knowing what her dad did, right? But we knew that she was in the Kinleith mill, or the dad was in the Kinleith mill. And the thing is in Auckland, I mean, we're if anyone knows from a big city, Toronto, London, or so on and so forth, anything outside of Auckland, you know, just kind of doesn't exist, right? I mean, and so when I flash forward now and I think back, crikey, like it was like I'm 9 years old and I've got this connection that I never knew I had, right? And having joined this company, I've been back to that Kinleith mill, you know, to see how debarker's running. I mean, I'm not sure if there was a Nicholson debarker, but there must have been, I would imagine, back then too. So, you know, from little 9-year-old kid that knows nothing about forestry, I leave school as and get an apprenticeship as a car mechanic. And so I did my time and trade with BMW and Mercedes-Benz, moved to the UK with it, did the big overseas experiences most of us, you know, Antipodeans do. Met a Canadian, and here I are. We're in Canada now, right? So into Calgary. So now I'm a car mechanic, and the industry is a very different one in Canada at the time. So we were all flat rate mechanics, and I was looking for a different interest, shall we say, that still had some technical skill behind it. And I joined Pratt & Whitney Canada, and so I built aircraft engines for, well, I guess from start to finish, about 15 years I was employed with Pratt & Whitney, and moved from building engines to servicing engines into a process improvement role. Then I decided, you know, life's good. Kids are 14 and 16. A sense of adventure kicks in, and we decided to sell everything in Calgary and hopped on a sailboat and went down to the Caribbean and sailed from the Caribbean over to Australia. Although we didn't get all the way, the boat sank. That's another story.
That's another podcast episode.
That's another podcast. But yeah, we hit a container. But anyway, so I ended up back at work. I won't say earlier than I was expecting, but because we'd had 2 years on the boat, but back into the working environment and back into a continuous improvement, process improvement role. Now, bear in mind, you asked the question, so you're getting the full life story.
Yeah, well, no.
So from there, I moved into oil and gas, manufacturing grease at a grease plant in Brisbane, in Australia. And then it was time to come back to Canada. One of my sons was moving back here to join the military.
Yeah.
Never panned out, actually, but he came back here, and I followed him back here. So, again, went into the oil sands in Alberta, which then kind of, that was a big change for me, because now I've gone from all this technical background into resource background, right? And so continuous improvement in the resource world, and into the recognition of how much resources play in basically in Canada's industry, right? And the growth of the country, sort of thing. So focus obviously on oil and gas, and then 2015 hit. Downsizing in the oil and gas industry. There was a bit of a recession, and I looked west. I figured, let's come west for something. So came out here, got a job with Westera Equipment, which kind of brought me closer then to the sawmill industry.
Yeah.
And so our equipment, selling bobcats and Doosan equipment, log loaders, then brought me to the attention of a headhunter looking for someone to take over what is now Eric's role.
Yep.
Here at Nicholson. And I have to say, I knew nothing about Nicholson, nothing about Debarkers, which is something that we might touch on a little bit later on, is that I'm here living on Vancouver Island, and I don't even know that Nicholson is being produced here. Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't know that Nicholson's here, and then part of this journey and podcast journey is for us to shine a light on manufacturers, on local manufacturers, on Canadian made stuff. And I think it's important that more of the general public know that there are, businesses like this. So we walked through the shop there today with Eric, and, there's a lot of families that rely on the income from this place. And we spoke to one of the employees that have been here since '86. And I said, what do you like about working at Nicholson? And he said, I like the steadiness.
Yeah.
I like the steady income. And I like that there's always work, but they don't rush us, but they focus on the quality, and there's always more work coming in. And so, that's something for the company to be proud of, that supports, Canadian families and it's a really cool journey.
Because you touched on the steady there. And so one of the things when I came here, I never considered myself a salesperson, right? Partly because, I had to start with high quality vehicles. Then you move into the aviation world, where it's not about rush. It's not about push. It's about keeping aircraft in the sky. So that's another quality factor in a different manner. And then you come to Nicholson, and coming to the steady thing is, I've said this so many times, we're not vacuum cleaner sales guys here, right? We're not walking in, throwing dirt on the thing, having a quick vacuum and like, buy this today.
Yeah.
We're relationship builders here, right? And so, and I mean, throwing a cheeky one your way, the reason you're here now is because of the relationship that we built up with you guys supporting us.
Yeah.
And the whole industry is like that. I think there's a time when, you could say, oh, we've got competitors, but we're not combatant, right?
Yeah.
We want the same piece of the pie that everyone else does. But the fact of the matter is it's all good people in this industry. I'm not saying that there's not good people in other industries, but I like the fact that the turn cycle is actually quite long here between someone, putting a request in for a debarker quote, saying I've got a project on the go. And that could be, 18 months, 2 years before that comes to fruition for us selling and building a machine. But we're through that process all the way through. And sometimes it can be a bit of a headache. We're going backwards and forwards because the the project changes, the scope changes, pricing changes, the market changes.
Yeah, the market changes. Yeah.
But you're always involved with that same person.
Yep.
And I find that, like going back to the guys in the shop that you said, that steadiness of this, that building up of relationships, really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so let's not have John take all the spotlight. You know, Eric, you studied engineering at UBC.
I did.
And you've been working at Nicholson for a decade, almost a decade.
Almost a
now.
decade.
And, you know, I see you and John at all these conferences, and you're always a lot of fun to chat to, and I always enjoy spending time with you. But tell us about your journey from studying engineering at UBC to, you know, now you're in a regional sales role, and, you know, how did that come about? And obviously you got this engineering background, and now, you know, into the sales role.
Well, if I can answer for Eric,
Just push down the way here. Yeah, so I started in engineering. I was like always been like a technical kind of person, like interested in mechanical things. So I took engineering at school, and then worked at a previous employer for about 5-6 years, and then I came to Nicholson in the R&D department. I was in the R&D department for about another 5 or 6 years, working on, kind of all aspects of what Nicholson does for engineering, like small little designing brackets or larger scope things. As I kind of progressed in engineering, you had, tasked with like bigger projects or managing larger projects and stuff like that in the company. And then John's predecessor retired, and John was moving into the director role, and one of the regional sales manager positions opened up, and I was like, hey, I wouldn't mind trying something new. I kind of like to use the analogy a little bit, like in engineering. I've been doing like R&D and engineering for like 10 years at that point, over 10 years. And I was always cooking. I was cooking different things, but I was always cooking, and I was like, I don't want to cook anymore. I want to try something a bit different. So I was like, and I really actually enjoy, like John mentioned this, like like customer facing or the relationship. I enjoy that part of the job, actually, like talking to the people and getting to know them and helping them work through a problem. Like you're helping people solve a problem, and it's quite satisfying when you are able to work through a problem and help them get to a solution that, benefits them. So it's, I've done that. And I'd say having the engineering background has been quite helpful. The machines are quite technical. And I find sometimes, I think in the sales role, you kind of want things like the customer wants it as fast as you can give it to them. Really, they want it like right now, and you realize that's not possible. But I do appreciate why sometimes the solutions can take a while. Like I know how much work sometimes things can, like on the engineering side. I'm like, oh yeah, that is not a small task. Like that's going to take some time to do that. And I can appreciate now, like when I go to the engineering department with a request or some sort of problem that the customer has brought forward, I can understand why, it's going to take that amount of time, and I can help, sort of talk to the customer. Why is it going to take this long to, come to a solution for that problem?
Yeah, and you can speak with that technical knowledge that perhaps, a different salesperson with a different background can't. And
maybe they'd be more challenged with it than I would, type thing.
Yeah.
So
let's go back and talk about the history of Nicholson. And, the company's been around since 1948, am I correct? Started in Seattle, Washington. So can you speak about the history of the company and how, the company has evolved into, the leading manufacturer of debarkers? I mean, maybe we can even go further back from that. Like, what is a debarker and the general premise of what it does for a mill,
Sure, I can take that. So a debarker is usually like the first piece of equipment at a sawmill. That's sort of in the building or just next to the building, taking the logs as they come in. And it's a stationary machine. It's fixed to the ground, and the logs go in, like in a simplified version, the logs go in one end with bark on them, and the logs come out the other end without bark on them. Now, there are several different types of debarkers out there. Nicholson produces ring debarkers. So it's basically a debarker with a large ring that has some tools on it, and the log just goes through steady, the ring spins, and it scrapes the bark off the log. Essentially, that's, in a very simple explanation of a ring debarker. And after that, it would go through the mill, and there'd be other processes down the line. Nicholson didn't start building ring debarkers. I think the first debarkers they built were kind of more of like a rosser head or a grinder type barker, or like something like a lathe type barker where they'd spin the log and scrape the bark off the log.
Basically grinding the bark off.
Yeah. But I think in like the early 50s, they started to make like the first ring debarkers Nicholson made. They came out with those. I think a lot of it was just probably necessity, because taking the bark, I've done it. Like my grandfather had me scraping bark off logs when I was a kid. He was making something, and we had those, like, I don't know what they're called, those long things. I was on one side, my brother was on the other side, and we're like grunting and struggling. And, the bark was probably only like half an inch thick.
Yeah.
So I think coming up with some sort of like automated debarker, mechanized debarker was probably like, okay, we're not going to have people doing this anymore. We need to come up with something better.
And I think also, too, something else to touch on is why we debark, right? And there are a number of reasons for that. The primary reason in the mills that we supply is that taking the bark off is removing the most, in essence, the most abrasive piece of the log.
Yeah.
And so it basically saves your cutting blades.
Yeah.
Right. So getting the bark off, number one, would be, if I were to say why debark, that would be the primary reason for a sawmill. But number two is that depending on what application you're doing with the rest of the log, or what you're doing with that remaining fiber, you don't want bark in a, for instance, if you're going to chip that log into pulp. So the bark's got to come off, because it's going to degrade the value of the pulp.
Yeah.
Of course, if you look into export log applications, like down in Australia and New Zealand, they're very engaged with debarking logs before they get shipped to Asian markets. That's where the bugs live.
Yeah.
So you've got to get the bark off as well. So there's a vast reason for wanting, or for vast, I say, many reasons that you'd want to take bark off logs. For those that don't necessarily know why would you do that?
Yeah.
In some cases, of course, people like the live edge look. Well, you're not going to run that through the bark.
You're not going to run that through, yeah.
But generally speaking, there's the bark is ultimately where the tree waste goes. So if you're in New Zealand, for instance, and you're in volcanic soil, that volcanic grit will go into the bark.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very abrasive on sawmills, or on saw blades and sawmills. So why do we ring the bark? Well, going on to what Eric said, the early Rosser style literally ground the bark off, but they would also grind the fiber off. And so you would lose all that white wood as well in the process. Whereas ring debarking literally only is designed to take the bark off and leaving as much of the fiber as intact, and fiber is money.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, in today's age of tight, tight economy and tight tolerances in mills, the mills are looking for every advantage they ever get. And when you're running a mill for 24 hours a day, which some mills around here and in North America and in the globe, they do run, 5 shifts, 12-hour shifts, constantly. If you can save wear parts throughout the mill by, creating less grit and less wear in the mill, then obviously
That's right.
the debarker, and a high quality debarker like Nicholson make, obviously, plays a big part. So,
Actually, I was going to say, because old Bill Nicholson started in Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a bit of a story as to how it ended up here too. Which
Yeah, you did touch on that when we were we were in on the shop tour. So and I'm a big fisherman, love fishing, and I hear there's a connection there.
So the story goes that Nicholson had a shop in Seattle. Bill Nicholson, he was the founder of the company, the original Mr. Nicholson. They were looking for a new manufacturing facility somewhere close to, big trees, big wood, Vancouver Island, back in this would have been whatever, probably the 70s or something like that, 60s or 70s. That was one of the places to go. So they purchased a manufacturing facility right down in the inner harbor in Victoria. And that's where Nicholson was. And it also gave a place for Bill to keep his boat, his fishing boat. So Bill had a new manufacturing facility and a fishing boat slip. So Nicholson, that's how we ended up on Vancouver Island. It was just kind of a funny story, but here we are, 45 years later, we're still on the island.
Yeah, and located here in Sydney, British Columbia, now for 45 years. We spoke to one of your employees that's been here now for 39 years. That's something to be proud of, and to be Canadian made is a big feat. So let's talk about what that means to you both to be Canadian, made. Like, how does that, relate in the culture of the company and the history and your products are obviously, one of the world leading, if not the world leading, debarkers in the world. You're shipping them all around the world. You can tell me how many countries you're in, but being Canadian made is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a point of pride, I think, for everybody that works here, that they're Canadian made. Certainly for me, a debarker is a big piece of equipment. It is a big, and there's actually a lot of technology in a debarker. Like, just looking at it, you're kind of like, oh, you're just scraping bark off a log. But there's actually a lot of trial and error has gone into designing these debarkers. Like, a lot of where we're at today is because of what Nicholson did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's the development has been steady and going along in time. And yeah, being Canadian, it is a point of pride. And I think a lot of things a lot of manufacturing has moved outside of, Canada or like Western nations. And keeping something like this in Canada, it's this is where the logging was quite prominent back in the day on the west coast of Canada, and it still is to some degree. And these pieces of equipment were made here, and they're still made here to this day. I think that's it is a point of pride, and I think our customers are often they like that aspect. They definitely do. Many of our customers really, oh, it's still made in Vancouver Island in Canada. Yes, it is. And okay, great. It's definitely attractive to.
Well, I think
the buying machines.
Canada's got a great deal of respect in the world.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, whether you talk, people, peacekeepers, so on and so forth. And so I think when people realize that the product's made in Canada, we get an association with that as well. And so not only are we associated with the good things that are Canadian, but we deliver a product that is super high quality that just goes to continue to promote that feeling or that observation that Canada's worthy of respect and quality in the world.
Sorry, Eric, go ahead. Yeah.
So even recently there was a show in Japan, and we had one of our partners down there was representing Nicholson at the show, and they had to come up with some brochures, and we have brochures in English and French and German and Spanish, but Japanese brochure is not something in our, it's not something we can easily create. So they said they would do it. I'm like, okay, great. We gave them the files for the brochure, and they put, the Japanese language on it. And they came back, and I was like, oh, there's still a decent amount of English on here. Like, no, that was intentional. Was we want the Japanese consumers to know that it's still Canadian, because that has quite a cachet to it. And I was like, that was intentional to leave that bit of English on there and make it known it was Canadian. It's kind of this cachet in Japan for this Canadian made heavy duty wood processing equipment. So it's an example of that.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a huge sense of pride and culture at the company and the employees. Based on this being a Canadian-made company that ships globally. And can you tell me about the global markets that you serve? I know Canada has been a huge one. The US has been a big one, but since we've seen each other at conferences, trade shows, you have been expanding into Europe. Has been a big market, John?
Well, Europe's always been our market, but I'd say we hadn't focused strongly there on the level of support that we should have. So part of my role coming in here in the last 4 or 5 years now is to just improve the customer support level stuff. So though our role is selling capital equipment, we can't do that if we don't further support it. And it's a shame in one respect that we don't have some of our aftermarket crew in here. But the Nicholson debarker doesn't get dropped off and then we walk away from you. Mm-hmm. So when we look globally, we can't just sell something into South America without having good support down there. And we do have support. We have representatives in Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, Chile, now Spain, Germany, Austria, France, Japan, and notwithstanding our own support that we give here in North America. It was that aftermarket support level that we do give when we do go and ask, why do you buy a Nicholson, right? Because it's always interested me, like you've got choice of anyone, and there are healthy competitors out there. I'm not going to lie, I think we're the best, right? I'd be wrong, or I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't think that either. But a lot of people will say it's what Nicholson's done during the process of holding our hands over 25 years or 30 years. So increasing the support in various markets is very, very important to us, because when we sell a debarker is going to last, well, I mean, we've got debarkers running in New Zealand that would literally deliver there in the 50s. Yeah. Some of them need to be replaced, and I mean, this is part of our job, is to say, hey, look, at a certain point, it may be more cost effective to replace than to keep it alive. But any guy with an old car will tell you, right, or a boat, they don't mind piling some extra cash into it. But by building out this support level into these markets, it means that we will stretch out. I mean, we were down in Africa not so long ago. Yeah. Africa's got 14% of the world's fiber. Yeah. And really is underutilized, though they're importing logs from elsewhere. So we're looking at all these markets, touching on something that we said earlier. What's not well known is, I would say, probably 85% of the people in Victoria don't know that we have this world-class outfit here, shipping globally, that's got this respect in the world. Yeah. Right here in Victoria, people take off and they see Nicholson as they take off out of the airport here. Right now we're overshadowed by the Amazon building. Yeah. Okay. Which is something in its own right. But I mean, but when I look back, and so how do we just let people know, and this is part of this, that we're here doing really good work, and people do know that they're built in Sydney, right? Yeah. Actually, a side note to that, I mean, I must have been here about 3 or 4 weeks, and I pick up the phone, and the chap from the States goes, "Where am I calling?" And I'm like, "Well, you're talking to me, I'm in Sydney." And he heard the accent, right? And heard it with a Y. And went, "No, I want the Debarker manufacturer in Canada." And I'm like, "No, you got it, mate. Like, we got it." But we shouldn't be thought of like that. We should be thought of as this, manufacturer. And we've thought about, we always think, are we located in the right place, right? It was located here because Vancouver Island had a lot of timber. Yeah. And so you manufacture where you're gonna sell to your local market. Well, the market's grown away from us.
Yeah.
But the world's become smaller, shipping's become better.
Yeah.
The internet means we can have conversations with people a lot easier. So once upon a time, it might have been, well, are we going to move out of Sydney? Are we going to move somewhere else closer to our market? The world's so small, we're in our market.
Yeah.
And we're very happy here.
I guess that speaks to one of the questions I was going to ask about, you know, the shifts in the forestry sector in North America. I imagine that, you know, the industry in Canada and specifically in North America has had some challenges in recent years, and we've seen shifts in the market. And every time we speak, you know, you're getting on a plane to fly somewhere. So I imagine that creates a lot of travel for you in your role as Director of Capital Sales. And so can you tell us about that, you know, those challenges in the market and what the business is doing to adapt to those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, for all our sales team, I mean, in fact, all our service team, we're all traveling all the time, right? And at times it can be hard on home life for some of the guys. But, you know, they'll tell you that it's stability, right? So there's a trade-off. At a certain point, say, I used to love travel, right? And I got to say, I'm throttling back on that. But we're also of the opinion that as much as I'm going to counterpoint to as much as the world's got smaller and we can teams meet and all of that, there's nothing like going to a sawmill and meeting with those people, right? I mean, the trip you just did through Alberta, for instance.
Yeah, or the Eastern Canada, you know, like Newfoundland type of thing. It is meet them in person. It makes a big difference. Meeting somebody in person versus, you know, you have all these, you know, conferences or talks over the internet, over web chat, but you know, going to meet somebody in person does make a big difference.
And Nicholson, I mean, as much as, you know, we're part of a bigger corporate beast now, and I say that in a nice way, obviously, but Nicholson's still small and family, right? And so, you know, when you've sold a debarker 25, 30, 40 years ago, those people still remember, for instance, the Nicholson family having sold that debarker to them. And, you know, it'd be remiss of us if we didn't continue that style, that methodology, well, I mean, it's not about working a crowd. This is just who we are, right? And I mentioned before about customers saying it's not just the debarker and having dropped it off, but what we do after. You know, we have our issues, we have our problems, but it's how you deal with it. And so it's often, we're in a global world now where, you know, you pick up an iPhone and there's 300 pages of terms and conditions that go along with it that most people just acknowledge and move along. And we're no different, though. We've got terms and conditions. But the terms and conditions, it's like, this is just keeping us legal, right? Because we know that if there's ever a time when someone wants some support with their product, the terms and conditions are that keeps us honest, if you will, but this keeps us human.
And we were in the shop there touring with Eric, and you know, we were seeing all the current models of debarkers, right? And then we came to the CNC area, and you showed us one of the rings, and you said, oh well, this is a 50-inch ring, or this is a different ring, and then you said, well, this is from a model 20 years ago. Or, you know, we're building this part specifically to service a customer that has had a Nicholson debarker that is now no longer in production, which, you know, you buy a car, then we equated it to a car. You buy a car and have it for 30 years. You know, Ford's not making you a new part for that car, but you guys are still servicing those customers with parts from the manufacturer, not a second hand other company, not refurbished parts, but brand new parts built right here. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I said that we like any like sort of Nicholson manufactured part, you know, we can still pretty much make any of those parts. You know, we do struggle with some of those older machines, but it's often with purchase components. that's where we can start to struggle. Struggle on things like sometimes big bearings from a long time ago, or some like, some oddball gearboxes and stuff like that. We do struggle a little bit, but anything that Nicholson, actually manufactured the part. When we have all the drawings, many of them, like as I mentioned before, like they're not on the computer because they're all on like an old blueprint in the sea canister that's, sandwiched next to the plant here. They got to go digging through a stack of paper to find the drawing. But anything that Nicholson has made at, some point in time, we can pretty much make it again.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, and then the trade-off to that, though, is in sometimes it's almost not cost-effective, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do, and I mean, this will come out all the time whenever, we try to find solutions for people. And I know it's easy corporate speak, like buzzwords, but we want to be part of putting the puzzle together. Well, I mean, we'll never put the last piece in. We'll let you do that sort of thing, But when we do come to these people and they say, oh, we need X part because it's 50 years old, it's like, can I guide you in a different direction?
Yeah.
Right. And not because we want to sell you a new debarker. No, we want to make sure that you keep running, that you're cost effective, because we want to keep you along as a partner beyond.
Yeah. So let's switch gears and talk about the new technology and innovation that is driving the company forward. I mean, we looked at some of the additive manufacturing in the workshop tour there. Like that was pretty incredible. So can you talk about, Nicholson obviously has a long history of providing debarkers to the industry, but without change and without advancement in technology, without robotics, without new CNC machines, there was a lot of cool stuff going on out there. So,
well, I'll say a few words and I'll let Eric take over on the technology side. Often when we're at a sawmill and or trade show, we strive to ask, what is it that you want changed? What do you want to see coming? And I would say, like, everyone starts that piece of conversation off with, don't change anything with your debarkers, right? Like, your debarkers are robust, they last a long time, they're easy to fix, they're cheap to maintain. Don't change anything. And then they follow up, but what new's coming, right? What new tech is coming? And then it's like, well, you can't have both. You can't have the egg without cracking it, sort of thing. And so there's a lot of tech being considered, and I'll let Eric take over from there because.
Yeah, I mean, one of the new, I guess, as time goes on, like manufacturing methods and what you can do with materials and the materials available change, and that's, I think, what manufacturers, and certainly Nicholson included in this, can take advantage of. Like with the new, we saw that new 3D printing machine. It's basically, for the benefit of the audience that wasn't on the tour, it's a CNC machine with a module added to it that can do additive manufacturing. So it uses powdered metallurgy, and we can basically create our own powdered metallurgy, whatever composition or combination of multiple powders we like. And it uses a laser, and it prints it onto another material, like a blank. In our case, we're doing mostly knife tips. So our knife tips traditionally were done with a metal blank, and you have a soldered on carbide, we call them chiclet. But now you have that metal blank, and we just print on a wear resistant and impact resistant material. So previously with something like the solder on carbide, it's going to be hard and it's going to be wear resistant, but it's not going to be very impact resistant. But now we can start, with the advances in materials, we can start, hey, we can do something wear resistant and impact resistant. That's pretty cool. Our customers are going to like that. And, so from a, like I say, as manufacturing technology progresses, Nicholson takes advantage of that thing. And even today on certain things, like previously we would have done like a complicated weldment to make something, with some more advances in materials and manufacturing technologies. Maybe a casting or forging is a much like, you don't often get like stronger, lighter, and cheaper, but sometimes you can get stronger, lighter. You can get all three things, on the technology that's come out. And that's from like a manufacturing perspective, but even from you said the industry, sort of changing, like from a sort of product development side, with trees now, with the forest not being the trees are not as big as they used to be, or the ones you're cutting down are not as big as they used to be. People are cutting down trees closer to the ground. So a lot of the logs coming out of the bush have a big swell on the bottom or a big butt. And, Nicholson has developed a dynamic flare reducer, we call it the DFR, to sort of help with that problem. So it's a product that's essentially just a ring again that is integrated into one of our debarkers. It can be in either a single ring or multiple ring debarker, and it removes the taper off of the logs on a log by log basis. So small log comes in with a small taper, cuts it off. Big log comes in with a big taper, cuts it off, or doesn't matter, any combination. So that's, one of the things, one of the products that Nicholson has developed and started developing it like probably over a decade ago, that is in an attempt to solve a problem that the industry has evolved, and it's now a problem that never used to be there type thing.
Yeah.
So,
and the industry's, we always hear it, we want faster speeds, more production, less margin, so, it makes sense that any advantages that a mill can get, especially a large scale mill, they'd be looking to manufacturers like Nicholson for that. So,
but also like talking, metallurgy or manufacturing methods, our quality standards are high, right? So, I mean, I'll reach over here in just for a minute. But I mean, if we've got a knife arm, for instance, we make sure that the knife arm is consistent, regular, because you've got a rotating component. Well, it might not be rotating fast, but if you've got different weights in these or different weights in different areas in these, then you put imbalances into your machine, then you get, bearing issues and so on and so forth. So that's why, we do promote buy a Nicholson because you're going to get a consistent product, for instance. So there'll always be challenges. I mean, if you've got a market that's thriving, someone else is going to come into it, and there's going to be people making really good quality product. The one thing that I can sit here and say, though, is we know we make a quality product, and I can say that.
Yeah. And
it's a very consistent product. So whilst we don't change a lot in the outward appearance of a debarker, we've got a PhD metallurgist on site.
Yeah, on site.
Right?
Yeah.
We've got design people that are even just looking at the old stuff to say, what is it we can do better? What is it we can do better from a maintenance aspect, so that we don't have to beat something on, or we can unbolt it and take it off easily. So we're looking, what can we do for the benefit of maintenance for the sawmill? So we are, I'm not going to say we're leading or cutting edge, but we're constantly looking at our portfolio of what can we improve on, right? And to Eric's point, there's some pain that goes through that too. Like, everything works right off the hop. But we're very fortunate. We've got we've got industry partners that are willing to take a new product, to try it, and then give us the feedback back out of it. So that for me is when you say, what have you got coming out new? Well, we can only do so much of our own inventiveness, and then we have to start canvassing the industry to say, what problems do you need us to solve?
Yeah. And that was one of my questions is, what's coming down the pipeline and what excites you both? You travel a lot, you're seeing, I think one of the really cool things about talking to people that do get to travel a lot is we get to talk about forestry in Europe and forestry in Australia and New Zealand and in North America, and you're talking about Africa. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in different markets globally that excites you and you see as growth areas?
I mean, I think I'll say I think it kind of certain regions come into play at certain times that maybe weren't in play before. I'll just use Japan again for an example. working with our Japanese partner, recently found out like Japan had a lot of plantations of cedar, like, I don't know, X number of years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And now all this cedar's come to maturity. So they need to like process this cedar. So in Japan's kind of like, all of a sudden there's going to be a little bit of this boom in Japan to process they had all this wood that's now come to maturity and they need to use it. And the government's, incentivizing, industry to like figure out ways that they can use it and like, benefit the Japanese people. So I think like, so I was just saying like, it's kind of going like the regionally, like things kind of like can sort of swell in some areas where some areas kind of go down. So it's kind of exciting to see a little bit of that. Like, that's like, it's interesting how like, you don't even think about it, don't even think about the trees are growing, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden there's this huge, big, volume of wood that needs to have something done with it. Type of thing.
I can imagine that the dynamic flare reducer might be useful on some cedar products. So are they similar to the North American cedar with flared?
They do have a flared, but I think they're similar to like the Western red cedar, apparently. I haven't seen one, but apparently that's a very similar sort of species.
Yeah. Well, but what's also I find exciting, it comes back to the technology a little bit, is that we've got I'm not sure if I've got a brochure on hand. We probably do here, but I mean we've got all this old equipment here, for instance, and some of this stuff went by the wayside because either the technology of the time couldn't allow that to support, or the technology wouldn't support a long life product. And now we're finding that, wait a minute, all these new metals, new manufacturing methods are allowing us to open that catalog back up again. And that's, in essence, what we've been doing this last year is going, what was there before that was a problem for the market that the designers had a go at, couldn't really do efficiently or cost effectively, and then got binned off to the side again. And so now we're opening it back up again. But we are dealing with trees, but Nicholson's you've seen our facility. We can manufacture anything here. And we're a heavy manufacturer, right? We've got one of the what's the oven? The largest heat treating oven in Western Canada here, right? So what can we utilize to do that? Now, we don't want to deviate too far from what we do know. Like, this is our core business. And I had one of our customers down in New Zealand that actually said, as he was looking for components for his project, and I mean, this isn't a knock on anyone that delivers a turnkey system, but the question was, do you guys just do debarkers? And we said, yeah. He said, then, well, why would I buy a debarker from anyone else but the expert in debarking, right? And so, I joke that you open up a Snap-on toolbox. Well, Snap-on isn't great at building hydraulic stuff, right? So they'll do a really good job. So I'm not knocking anyone out there, but this remark sat with me as a huge takeaway. It's like, why would I buy a debarker from someone that doesn't concentrate on debarkers? And here I am saying, hey, we've got other stuff we can diversify it to. But that'll never take away from that. We made decisions to move away from chippers and stranders and shakers to go debarking what we're going to concentrate on. And it will always be that way. Like, but what else can we debark, for instance?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of fiber out there. There's bamboo out there. There's palm. There's all, we're not just, spruce, pine, or fir.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing that now we're engaging on. Say, well, okay, the world's going to a sustainability model. And so there is focus on whether trees get cut down or not, because they're environments for environments, right? But so what else do we look at in terms of what can we be a contributor to that part of the global solution, shall we say?
Yeah. And let's touch on that. Like we're sort of we've sort of had this question about sustainability and about forestry, and I like to sort of ask our guests, although you're only episode number 2, but this will be a guest continuing in our podcast, is what does forestry mean to you, and what does the goal of sustainability mean, and how can we project that message that forestry is a sustainable industry to our children or our parents or to the general public, because that message of sustainability is one that can often be hard to explain to people. So what does forestry mean to you, Eric?
I what does forestry mean to me? Forestry to me is I'd say, like, utilizing the forest in a manner that sort of benefits the community. I'd say, like, and that's kind of a very general term, but it doesn't mean like you're necessarily like cutting it down, or it was utilizing the forest like to benefit the community. I think that's how I would, that's how I think of forestry type thing. I'm just going to touch on you're saying, before educating the public, like, there's a bit of a story. My daughter came home from school one day, and she knows what I do. She knows I work for a company that makes log, machines that take the bark off of logs. And she came up to me, and she was quite a bit younger. She was probably like, I don't know, maybe, I think she was in grade 1, probably, maybe kindergarten, grade 1. She came up to me and she like dropped down
6 or 7.
Yeah, maybe 6 or 7. And she's like came up to me. She said, "Stop cutting down trees." And she kind of like, was pulling on my shirt. And I was just like, it's out of the blue, completely out of the blue. And I was just like, oh, like this, where, like, who told you? Like, where did this come from? I was more interested in just like, oh, where did this like random? I guess it came from school or something. Whatever. They had some sort of forestry tree thing at school, and maybe they watched Fern Gully or something. I don't know. And but I was like, oh, it needs to start, I think, with little kids like that, and not in a way that you're forcing an idea on them, but just educating them that forestry is it's not a bad word. It's a good thing. It helps society. We can utilize these things that are provided to us to benefit the community, and it's a renewable resource that continues to grow and come back. And I've seen before at some trade shows that I've gone to that I haven't seen it in Canada, but I've seen it down in the US, and I think they're perhaps doing a better job of this down there than we are up here. They have these booths set up, and they are kits for educators or parents to bring home to their kids, or for the parents to bring to their kids' teachers for their class. Like, hey, this is what forestry is, and this is what it does, and this is how it benefits all of us, type thing. I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea that they were coming out with these kits, these education kits for little kids. Like, these kids in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, just to so they know what forestry is, and they don't just get one opinion on what forestry is. Like, it's they hopefully get like more well-rounded sort of education on what forestry is and what it can be and what it means to them. So
yeah, because I think we overuse, I don't know, I say you overhear perhaps the sustainability thing, and it kind of gets glossed over. You lose what that effect is. I mean, I have to say, you just have to zoom in on, like a Google Earth, for instance, to a forestry plantation in New Zealand or near Noosa in Australia, and you'll see the trees planted in rows upon rows, right? Yep. And it's then the penny drops that's a crop down there. Mm-hmm. And the public, if you will, have realized that, yeah, I mean, I've say it all the time. It's like I'm growing soybeans or I'm growing wheat. Yeah, there's a trade-off, of course. I mean, when you're growing a tree for 18, 30 years down in New Zealand, it's become an environmental habitat for someone. And so there's an effect when you go and cut that down. But I'm not going to go to the nth degree and say, well, when you harvest soybeans or anything that, worms get upended too. But there's a where do you stop in terms of this balance? And I know it's easy to say because I'm sitting in a forestry industry, to say, oh, this is my viewpoint, because there's always a counter. But I think it comes down to this balance of doing something that is renewable, sustainable, using that word, that isn't necessarily harmful in the production process to, I'm going to say, the environment generally, right? Because you can replant. And something that was driven home for me was with one of our American customers, when he was talking about carbon credits, carbon capture, and so on and so forth. And you can say, well, when a tree is growing, it's literally sucking carbon out of the air. But this gentleman said, look, I've got my grandfather's old wooden desk sitting in my office, and that was a tree that was cut down, and as that desk sits there, it's a carbon capture, right? And I mean, I'm oversimplifying this, of course, but something else has been replanted in this place. So you can do the math or the calculations to say, well, while it's growing, it could be bringing more. But all of a sudden I'm thinking there's another tree growing and we've got this block of carbon capture here now. And then when I look at what we're doing with architecture, with wood buildings these days, engineered wood, I always remember this, and this was, I think, before I came into this industry. There's an architect, and I'm buggered if I can remember his name. But he always said, I always repeat what he said. He said, no one ever hugged the concrete building, right? And you can't help it if you go into the airport in Portland,
yeah.
and it's warmth.
Yeah.
The
Faculty of Forestry at UBC, the beautiful building made out of engineered wood, and and the I can't remember how many stories the building is at UBC, but there's a building, high-rise apartment building there now manufactured. I think it's 12 or more stories, all almost entirely out of wood.
Yeah,
that is really, really exciting.
Well, I will say, I mean, we reached out and picked up the knife arm, right?
Yeah.
If that had been a steel one, no one looks at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a novelty because it is made out of wood, but that's an indicator for me. It's, it's very emotional, right? Wood.
Yeah.
And so it's in the same way when some people like to see mountain vistas and others like to see the ocean. Well, there's a vast amount of people love to see like wood in hand cotton goods. Yeah. And yet at the same time, they counter where it came from. And so we're trying to do it to say, like, again, going back all the way back to saving fiber, right? So we process lots of logs every day, but if we can get more out of it, that's what our contribution is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the industry in general has, the advancement in the forest industry is so incredible to watch. When I first started working in Australia, every summer I worked there, they would shut down the mill, and there would be every 2 weeks they would bring in a new piece of technology, a new scanner, a new lumber line where they were stacking differently, or a new kiln, a new head rig, a new debarker. It was incredible, the advancement of technology in that particular mill. I worked at that mill for 3 years, 3 summers in a row. I would go back there every summer in my university break, and there'd be something new there every year. And that was just in the space of 3 years. So the advancement of technology in the industry has been incredible.
Well, but also not just that, but what then are we extracting from it? And if I look at one of our customers here on the island, who they make laminate. Once upon a time, the spindle that came out of the end of it was just burnt.
Yeah.
Well, now they've gone to a secondary product, and that spindle becomes fence posts.
Yeah.
And if you look at sawmills throughout Europe, you've got the sawmill, then you've got sawdust, You've got the bark that comes out of it that's being turned into pellet now.
Yeah.
And so the industry is evolving and taking far, far more out of that product than we ever had before. I mean, obviously, you know, I love a paper napkin, right?
Yeah.
And so all manner of stuff. I mean, mind you, I got to say, good nod to Amazon, right? Because the amount of cardboard boxes that that they go through.
Amazon's next door here to the Nicholson Manufacturing facility. So, yeah. But look, I wanted to thank you both for your time today, and thank you for welcoming the ForestNet Media team into the Nicholson Manufacturing family, and having us here and giving us a shop tour, Eric. And
Yeah, no, thanks, man.
thanks very much for being a part of our second podcast, and really appreciated it. So
Yeah, looking forward to watching
yeah,
number 18, number 19.
yeah. So where can people find you? Let's wrap it up. Where can people find Nicholson? What's the website? What's the phone number?
Website is pretty easy, debarking.com. So debarking.com brings you to our website. And the phone number is on the website because I don't know that off by heart. And so
Yeah, and here in Sydney, British Columbia.
Yep.
You know, if you're in the local area, if you're from Victoria, maybe drop by and figure out what's actually going on in your local community. There's jobs here. There's education and mentorship to happen to local students, and Nicholson's been a part of the Victoria Sydney area for 40, 50 years now. So that's
Half a century.
yeah. So,
and there is a sales email on the website. And if anybody's who's watching this who wants to see how a debarker is made, just send an email to that email. We'll get it and say you're going to be in Victoria and you want to come for a tour. And we're happy to show anybody the plant. And
and check out our YouTube channel for the tour, the shop tour.
Yeah.
So
yes, what YouTube channel will it be on?
it's ForestNet Media.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect.